Who are the sons of God in Genesis chapter 6? I saw a lot of you asking that question on the video of Spirit Spouse and other videos. And I know that Genesis chapter 6, the sons of God, a view and the scripture is very difficult, as well as it's very controversial. There's different views on that. And so I am not in any way a Bible scholar, but I'm going to dive in and also reference few books or few blogs that I got some of this information that I'm going to share with you. This is not necessarily my personal revelation. There's so many people that had this insight way before me, and I learned and gleaned from them. So I'm going to right away make that disclaimer from the beginning. Okay, this is not Vlad's view or Vlad's discovery. Let's dive into those verses in Genesis chapter 6, verse 1, 2, and 3, and 4. Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth. I want you to notice that it talks about men from the beginning. It's important to notice that. Men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and took wives for them of all whom they chose. And the Lord said, My spirit shall not strive with man forever, for he is indeed flesh, yet his days shall be 120 years. There were giants on the earth in those days. So I want you to see how it's connecting. The flesh, the sons of God. There were giants on the earth in those days. And also afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Now there's really two main views on who are the sons of God. The first view, it's a common one called the Sethite view. Pretty much says that the descendants of Seth were the sons of God. Seth took over, pretty much for his brother, who was the godly one, Abel. He was killed by Cain, and then God, started to kind of work through the Seth's lineage. And then these descendants of Seth, mainly, I guess, males, they started to interact with the women from the Cain's lineage and started to have sex. And then because of that, these offsprings were born to them. The second view is that the sons of God are not human, but they are divine beings who, when crossed our boundary set by God and started to have sexual relationships with women. I'm going to share with you why I'm leaning more toward the second view. The first reason is that sons of God in the Old Testament refers to spirit beings. This is not the only time where the word sons of God is mentioned. We see it also used 3 times in Job. Job chapter 1 verse 6, Job chapter 2 verse 1, and Job chapter 38 verse 7. And in all of these 3 references, the term sons of God was used to spirit beings. It was not used or referenced to human beings who were simply closer to God. And therefore, in the context, the sons of God of Genesis 6 cannot mean human descendants of Sethites or human descendants from the lineage of Seth, because in other places of the Bible, this word refers to spirit beings. It refers to divine beings. The second reason that I'm leaning toward that as well is that Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 and verse 2, if you notice how we read, it contrasts when men began to multiply, okay? And then it refers to sons of God. The men, meaning there were good men as well on the earth who were multiplying and who were giving birth to, who were producing children, daughters. And then it makes a distinction between men and sons of God. And therefore, I believe that it's implying that sons of God are non-human beings. Otherwise, it would just use the same word for men and sons of God. The reason number 3 is that the view that the sons of God refers to the godly line requires an unlikely explanation that the ungodly women were more attractive than the godly women. It kind of makes it look like that all the daughters of Cain from the line of Cain were attractive and all the daughters from the line of Seth were not attractive. And kind of, there's really just a bad explanation, I think, for that. Genesis chapter 6 verse 1 explains the pursuit of the human daughters but not sons. If Genesis chapter 6 is about intermarriage between the godly line and the ungodly line, it's odd that only godly men were marrying ungodly women and not ungodly men marrying godly women? Were the godly women just unattractive? So why is it not, the other people getting married to the other people? Why was it only that the descendants of Seth, the males, were married the daughters? Why not the descendants of Seth, the daughters of descendants of Seth, were marrying also ungodly men? And so I think that explanation in here kind of pretty much, it's very unlikely that that was taking place. Number 4 is that humans were going along with intermarriage with spirit beings in the quest for immortality. This is very interesting. If you're reading this Genesis chapter 6, that humans, one of the reasons why these daughters were willing to have sex with spirit beings is that I believe the spirit beings were offering them immortality. Ever since man committed sin, death entered into the world, and these spirit beings were trying to promise that we will live forever. In fact, this is an old lie from the beginning all the way till now. I mean, what did Satan sold Eve with? That if you will eat, you will not die. If you will eat of the forbidden fruit, you will not die. And then it's interesting because then God says, my spirit will not strive with men forever. It's interesting, he says, for he is indeed flesh. So even though there was this connection between the divine and the human, they still could not achieve immortality, because God right away promised that their dwelling on the earth will be 120 years. God says this is not going to happen. You're not going to achieve immortality by having sexual relationship with divine beings who rebelled against God. And the meaning of 120 years could also apply that right after God pronounced that, it took 120 years, and then God wiped the earth through the flood. And so not only, they couldn't live now more than 120 years, but also within 120 years, God pronounced his judgment. Now, this applies to us today too, because a lot of people today are trying to achieve, especially the New Age movement, a lot of what technology development is, curing even a lot of the sicknesses, and people are really trying to achieve immortality. They're trying to even create these robots that they can plant or impart or transfer their consciousness to these robots, that these robots will live forever, and they will live on the earth through these robots. That's really a lot of what's happening even in our culture, and that is demonic, because God clearly stated ever since we ate of the forbidden fruit that we are gonna die, and then after that is judgment. And so there's no escape from that. Even if we find cure for cancer, we're still gonna die until we get the new resurrected bodies. And so this indicates, or we kind of can read into the text, or can kind of read in between the lines, that these spirit beings were offering immortality to fallen human beings in exchange for sexual relationship. Number 5, the context implies that Nephilims were resulting offspring of spirit beings interacting with humans. But why are the Nephilims mentioned in the same passage as the intermarriage of the sons of God and the daughters of men in Genesis chapter 6? It is unclear how these mighty men of renown came about, if it was not through the byproduct of intermarriage between sons of God and daughters of men. And so we assume and we think that that's really where they came from, through this intermarriage, since these verses are sandwiched together. Number 6, Jude supports this view. In fact, we see that the Jude likely understands that Genesis chapter 1 refers to intermarriage between spirit beings and the humans, and it gives more light into this. In Jude chapter 6, he speaks of angels who did not stay within their own positions of authority, but left their proper dwelling. And Jude seems to adopt a view from the first Enoch chapter 7, which references that Genesis chapter 6 view, and it gives deeper explanation that angels, the watchers, they left their proper domain, which God has outlined for them, and started to go into the daughters of men. See, God never intended humans to have sex with spirits. God intended for a male to be with a female, and female to be with a male. And so these are the proper boundaries for sexual relationship.